Barbara Board of Harbor Commissioners meeting to order. Ms. Brzezinski, would you call roll, please?
Yes, Bill Spicer.
Here.
Jim Sloan.
Here.
Corey Bantolin.
Here.
Betsy Kramer.
Here.
And Stephen McIntosh will be absent.
Very good. Mr. Reedman, any changes to tonight's agenda?
No changes tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Public comment appears to be sparse. We'll just leave that open in case we have a late arrival. Move to approval of the minutes.
So moved.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Very good.
I just want to make a comment about the minutes. Thank you very much for being so detailed, and I think it's helpful to have Mr. Conman's comments about the slip transfers in print as part of the minutes. So thank you.
Wonderful. Department update. Mr. Reedman.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Since we last met, the Council approved a 2-year lease agreement with Jacques Bertrand and David Villazana. Hope I got that close. Doing business as Harbor Mail Center at a base rent of $468 per month for the mail facility in the harbor there. The Council also approved a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with the Chandlery on the Breakwater, the yacht brokerage in the harbor, at a base rent of $1,541 per month for their 3 yacht brokerage offices that they have at 125 Harbor Way 3, 4, and 5. And I should correct that. There are 2 other yacht brokerages in the harbor in that building, Sunset Kid Yacht Sales and Seacoast Yacht Sales. Additionally, the Council approved a resolution requesting a grant in the amount of $73,000 from the Department of Parks and Recreation, Division of Boating and Waterways for 4 pump-out facilities at the harbor. And getting a resolution accepting the grant is usually one of the first steps of getting these grants from the Department of Boating and Waterways. They want an official resolution from the Council requesting it before we can even apply for it. So it's the first step. The Council also approved a 5-year lease agreement with Andy Taylor, Blue Water Hunter, at a base rent of $2,430 per month for his 878 square foot location at 117 D Harbor Way. The Council approved a 5-year lease agreement with one 5-year option with Allied Voyage, LLC, doing business as Ocean Air, and that's John Payne's business. He decided rather than go sole proprietor, he would go with an LLC. So Allied Voyage is his LLC. His base rent is $1,200 per month for the 339 square foot space there at 125 Harbor Way. And finally, the Council authorized me to exercise the renewal terms on the professional services contract with Garden State Fireworks for fireworks July 4th and Parade of Lights fireworks displays 2016 through 2019. So we have last year was our first year, and we have 4 one-year options that we can exercise at our discretion. So in addition, tentative items for next month are the annual Clean Marina report and the lease with Santa Barbara Water Taxi we're working on right now. And that concludes my report. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Reedman? Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, thank you. So just as a reminder, where are the 4 pump-out stations? I remember 2 of them.
I think I can remember 4.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, the 4 pump-out stations are, there are 2 at the eastern end of Marina One, and 1 at the fuel dock, and 1 at the western end of Marina One. So 3 on Marina One and 1 at the fuel dock.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Scott. Moving on to facilities management, Mr. Treiberg.
Good evening, Chair Spicer and Commissioners. It's hard to believe that after only 2 years, the harbor closed again. In 2014 was the first closure in decades, and once again, at the end of February, we had a closure that we really didn't expect. The contractor began dredging 5 weeks earlier, We knew this was kind of coming and reached out to the Corps, and they really expedited the process, which was helpful. But the sand deposition exceeded the dredge's production for several days, and actually there was a closure with the Coast Guard declaring a safety zone. The safety zone declaration is something that had been declared in Ventura several weeks prior and required that boats entering and exiting the harbor receive permission from the harbor authorities, which was us in this case, or receive an escort. It was really unfortunate. This image here, kind of, if people are familiar with the harbor, it gives an example of just how narrow the channel was. This is a couple days before the day it closed off, and at low tide we had maximum depths of 3 to 4 feet over a width of about 50 feet wide, which is really, really narrow by Santa Barbara Harbor standards. Many boats were running aground, and the only boats that could really operate were the lowest draft commercial fishing boats. All the other operations were shut down. It was kind of interesting to see, and this picture doesn't entirely do it justice, but Scott and I were out one day, and these waves were breaking right up to the front of the dredge as the dredge tried to punch a channel through that giant sandbar off the end of the sand spit. They worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they were able to create a small opening after a few days. You can kind of get a sense for how much they had kind of eaten into that large sandbar. And what's a little bit deceiving about this is the red and the green buoys marking the channel entrance, those are only about 75 feet wide. So they managed to get a channel wide enough for most of the regular operators to get in and out of the harbor, but it was very narrow. We were out one day when the Coast Guard vessel was escorted back in, and it used up a whole bunch of that channel getting in and out. It was kind of scary. Nevertheless, they went back to work. During the previous time, just to open it up, they'd exceeded their 120,000 cubic yard contracted limit, and the Corps of Engineers had received funding for another 80,000 cubic yards. So with 200,000 cubic yards, they were able to create a channel that was about as wide and deep as we normally have. So we went from about a 75-foot wide channel to something well over 170 feet wide. This funding, the extra funding, was out of what was called a work plan that the Corps had that funded some extra work in Ventura and some other harbors. So we got our share of that. But even after that was done, it was obvious there was an extra 100,000 cubic yards of channel of sand in the channel. So we reached out to the Corps of Engineers again and asked if there was additional funding, and they found funds through their emergency fund for an additional 100,000 cubic yards of sand. So that will bring it to an overall total of 300,000 cubic yards of sand. That's compared to an average of about 120,000 cubic yards, so almost 2.5 times what we normally get. They've stood down for a couple of weeks. They had to do some contract processing and give the Pacific Dredge staff some time off. But they're going to resume dredging a week from Monday on March 28th, and it should take them about 5 days to finish up. And then the channel should be in great shape for the spring and the summer until next fall when they start up again. Bellingham Marine Industries recently completed Phase 6 of the Marina One replacement project. Phase 6 included H and I fingers. Right out the gate, we moved all the boats off H finger, the first finger we worked on, and there was a tremendous storm. Everybody thought El Nino was hitting in all its fury, and it lasted 1 week. We stood down for a week, and as most people know, it didn't pan out, and construction moved on rather rapidly after that. All projects start with demolition. This is H finger, showing some of the tired and beat up docks. They take about 2 or 3 days to demolish the old docks. And the very same week, they move right into installing the new docks. New docks are installed at the launch ramp and sub-assembled in lengths where they can get them across the harbor and put into place. It takes 1 day to put in the main walk and about 2 days to put in the finger docks. So it really goes quickly. After a week or 5 or 6 days, you go from an old dock to a brand new dock. But the devil's in the details, and the utilities take quite a bit of time. It takes over 2 weeks to install the fire water, domestic water, all the electrical system. Each dock box has power centers to them, fire hose cabinets, and everything else. But Bellingham really did a great job. They worked very rapidly once again this year. The overall project was completed in 9 weeks, and that included 1 week off to move boats in and out of H-Finger, and they just did a great job. The construction cost, the total cost was a little over $1,585,000. As in my staff report, I mentioned that there was an escalation cost of $11,000. It was actually $32,000. We allowed $400,000 of escalation over this 4-year contract, and this is the first time they've billed anything against it, which reflects the low inflation we've had recently. So to date, we've borrowed a little over $9,100,000 from the Division of Boating and Waterways, with our annual debt service right around $680,000. Things are going along quite nicely. Next winter, we start with Phase 7. This is probably going to start January of next winter. We're going to work on E, F, and G fingers. And just as a reminder, we're going to add 4 slips to F finger. They're 35-foot slips and should really help get a few boats off the waiting list. And we're looking forward to starting that project up. It's all under contract. All the funds are secured. So that will be one more phase after that, and then this project will be done. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Triberg. Any questions? I had a few then. First off, my compliments on how you navigated getting the channel dredged. I know that that's a delicate dance, and you and the staff handle it well. How long was the safety zone put in place? How long was the closure?
Chair Spicer, the safety zone was in place for, I believe, 3 days, and on the 4th day, they opened the channel. It was still, they don't undeclare it a safety zone, but the channel was open for escorts, and then it took about another 4 days to really open the channel up wide. But I think for 3 days, we were escorting vessels in and out.
Okay, and then just curious, you said that they've removed 2.5 times the normal amount of sand. Is this the largest that you recall?
It will be. They've removed 200,000 yards now, and they'll do another 100,000. So when they're done, it'll be 2.5 times. In 2014, the last time it closed, we removed 250,000 cubic yards. So this will be the most since I've been with the waterfront, probably since 1998 or 1983, to put it in perspective.
Wow.
Tremendous
Great.
year.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for your report as well. Harbor Operations, Mr. Cronman.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. As you may recall, last year Harbor Commission supported and City Council ultimately adopted an ordinance describing designated fishing zones on Stearns Wharf. Well, since then, maintenance staff has done a yeoman's job installing 30 new no fishing signs on the wharf, complete with the municipal code reference, because as you may recall, that was the problem. We had a plethora of no fishing signs out there, but no municipal code reference. The good news is we removed 50 and added 30, so we don't have 80. We have 30 out there now, and so in addition to that, what we also did, there were no diving signs, 9 of them, at each of the ladders. That's where people typically in the summertime especially like to dive off the wharf, which is not safe and it's not legal. But again, there was no municipal code reference on those signs, so we added municipal code references to those signs as well. And finally, maintenance staff routed and painted 4 designated fishing area signs into the deck where the ordinance called for designated fishing areas. In fact, at City Council's request, it actually says designated fishing area, good luck. And I have a few slides to show you the end result. We're very happy with it. We think it has really contributed to the aesthetics of the wharf and the enforceability of the codes. So that's what the routed no fishing signs look like. They're higher. They're not stenciled on the boards, which were lower. They're on the upper railing. Very clear, well placed, very visible. And this is the designated fishing area good luck signs. And these are on the seaward finger and on the shoreward finger, which really very clearly, it sort of counterbalances the no message, if you will, and is a welcoming, friendly invitation to go fishing where the designated areas are. As a respectful reminder, as part of the ordinance, the waterfront director has the discretion to move those areas if there's like a fishing derby or the Sea Center has a big event on the shoreward finger. And finally, here are the no diving signs, and these now have the municipal code reference, so they're all enforceable. So moving on, last week 2 weeks ago, on February 22nd and 23rd, representatives from the U.S. Federal Small Business Administration came to Santa Barbara, came to the harbor to welcome fishermen, especially those affected and businesses affected by the rock crab closure this last late fall and continuing on in some areas at the Channel Islands, to explain their programs and help applicants fill out loan applications. 15 fishermen came through during those 2 days, and 5 filled out applications. And meanwhile, I told you last month about how Governor Brown had sent a letter to the Secretary of Commerce requesting that a fishery disaster be declared in California that would include both the Dungeness fishery to the north of us and our rock crab fishery. Well, I'm happy to report at this time a bill has been entered for consideration. It's H.R. 4711, if anybody wanted to look it up. It was sponsored by 2 San Francisco Bay Area Congress people. And basically, it's called the Crab Emergency Crab Emergency Disaster Assistance Act of 2016. It's currently in the Appropriations Committee, and from what you'll read online, you'll see that they're asking for $138 million. Now, of course, with our $2 million a year crab fishery, you can certainly tell that while it's right-minded relative to our crab fishery and related businesses, we're on the coattails of the Dungeness fishery up north, the closure of which has been literally, as you can tell, hundreds of millions of dollars of lost business in Northern California, all pretty much related to algae blooms and El Nino. So I will continue to keep you posted on this. And finally, on the fishery front, I also told you that the coast is clear, if you will. Forgive the pardon the phrase, but for crab fishing along the coast. But the islands, the Northern Channel Islands, are all still off limits. And what's driving it is what they call a block area, California Department of Fish and Wildlife block area number 710. It includes a little bit of the eastern end of Santa Rosa Island and a chunk of the western end of Santa Cruz Island. That area has tested on and off. Hasn't tested clean of domoic acid enough times for them to open up all 4 islands. So, or all 3 islands, Anacapa is closed to rock crab fishing. Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, and San Miguel. And so fishermen are very hopeful. They continue to send in samples, so fingers crossed that'll be open soon too for rock crab fishing. But I will certainly, as always, keep you posted on that. And 2 harbingers of spring. First, the Yacht Club's opening day ceremonies were on Sunday, March 6th, and they had great ceremony and a regatta that was very much a wild and windy ride. There were broken booms and broken rigging, but they toughed it out. And those that I've spoken with report a wonderful regatta that day. And it shows that they're tough and they're ready, and their season is underway. Marked particularly by the first wet Wednesday yesterday. I heard the horn at 5 o'clock, and I thought, it's on. Here we go. It's boating time in Santa Barbara. And so they had a great wet Wednesday event yesterday. And wet Wednesdays, of course, are open to any boat entered by a member of the U.S. Sailing Association recognized club. Locally, that, of course, means Yacht Club, Santa Barbara Sailing Club, with occasional out-of-towners invited to participate. Anybody can participate as a crew member in Wet Wednesdays if they're invited. And the first race starts at 5:10, and the races and the courses vary from 2 to 8 miles. And afterward, there's a big barbecue, and so the good times are here. And if you have any questions about Wet Wednesday, you can contact the Yacht Club either at 965-8112 or on their website at sbyc.org. But boating season is in full swing as we're seeing a lot more paddlers out there, and it seems like summertime in the last few days, not only weather-wise, but boating-wise. Very much in part thanks to Carl's efforts to work with the Corps and get the harbor dredge to a great depth and a great width. And again, on my plate is all our plates really, is our Operation Clean Sweep on May 7th. As you may recall, this is the beginning of the second, quote-unquote, circumnavigation of the harbor. We did this for 9 years, and we managed to start from Marina 4 and go all the way around to the end of Marina 1, during which time local volunteer divers from our dive businesses and volunteers, deck volunteers, hauled up a fairly astounding 6.2 tons of debris from the bottom. I think all of you up there have participated in one time or another in this. And now we're back to Marina 4 on May 7th. That's May 7th in Marina 4. We're going to go back to I hate to say the scene of the crime, but back to where we started. And one would even hope that the haul would be less than the 2 tons we got there the first time. But, as they say in politics these days, you got to count the votes, and we got to go down there and see what's down there. So May 7th, and if anybody wants to call me at 897-2587 or contact me by email, I'll be inviting volunteers and then soliciting volunteers from our long list of volunteers from the past several years in the next couple of weeks. So 897-2587 or mcronman@santabarbaraca.gov. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cronman. Any questions? I had one small question. Regarding the fishing signs, is there still the no overhead casting sign out there? Do you recall?
There are.
Okay.
And I don't believe there's a municipal code reference on that. I think that's just good behavior reminder.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you for your report. We are now at the new business stage. Item number 5.
Yes.
Jeanette, would you fill us in?
Item 5, Waterfront Department Fiscal Year 2017 Budget Recommendation. Recommendation that Harbor Commission A, receive a staff presentation on the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2017 budget submittal. B, recommend approval of a 2% slip fee increase in fiscal year 2017. C, recommend holding slip transfer fees for 28-foot and 30-foot slips at $400 per foot. D, recommend holding designated commercial fishing slips in Marina 1A and fishermen floats north and south at $200 per foot. E, recommend approval of a $25 slip transfer fee increase to $425 per linear foot for slips larger than 30 feet. F, recommend approval of a $10 per month increase in liveaboard fees from $140 per month to $150 per month. G, recommend adjusting cruise ship fees from $5 per person, passengers and crew, to $7 per passenger, excluding crew. H, recommend increasing Harbor Patrol Vessel Replacement Fund from $75,000 per year to $150,000 per year. I, recommend addition of a new position, Administrative Specialist Accounting. And J, forward a recommendation to City Council for approval of the Waterfront Department's proposed fiscal year 2017 budget and incorporation into the city budget process.
Quite a mouthful. I think I misheard one thing. Yeah, could you tell me again? I'm sorry. D.
Did I miss one?
Could you read D for me?
Yes.
I may have missed
D,
my notes.
D is recommend holding designated commercial fishing slips at Marina 1A and fishermen floats north and south at $400 per foot.
Okay, great. Thank you. I had the wrong notes. Okay, are we on to Mr. Bossy?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Just to go back in time a little bit, last month the Commission received a mid-year budget report, and that showed that we are on track to either meet or exceed our revenue projections for fiscal year 2016, and as well as we are also on target for our expenditures for 2016 and likely under. After that, we also presented a fiscal year 2017 budget overview, where we kind of took a big picture look at what we anticipated coming your way this month. So since that time, we have been working with our finance department and to adjust our numbers and refine our numbers and projections to more accurately reflect our 3-year seasonally adjusted averages. And so what that did was that increased our projected revenues. And then what that also does is that folds into our 2017 revenue projections going forward. So with that, I'm going to jump in. Just a reminder, not so much for the Commission, but maybe for the folks at home, the Waterfront Department is an enterprise fund. And what that means is we are charged with generating our own revenues and controlling our own expenses. We receive no general fund support. So whereas a lot of other city departments receive general fund monies from either taxes, sales taxes, and things like that, we do not. We have to generate all our own revenues, and we are solely responsible for both the revenues and the expenditures. Consequently, we are dependent on our lease rents and our user fees to maintain our emergency and capital reserves, as well as operate the harbor in an appropriate manner. So with that, our proposed fee adjustments for fiscal year 2017, and I believe you saw all of these except for a new one that was still being worked out regarding the cruise ships, so I'm going to go through these again. Slip fee rentals, we are proposing a 2% increase per our Division of Boating and Waterways loan, and that, again, funds our Marina One renovation program. Our slip transfer fees, holding the 28 and the 30-foot slips at their current rate, as well as designated commercial fishing slips. So what that means is that those slips that are above 30 feet would continue to get the 25-foot increase. Our liveaboard fee, we're proposing that we increase that from $140 to $150 per month. Would be the first such increase since 2004. And lastly, our cruise ship fee, which Jeanette had mentioned, changing that from $5 for both passengers as well as the crew to a straight $7 for just the passengers only. One of the primary, I should go back, Dominique Samario and Scott have been working with our cruise ship representatives. It was a request of theirs. The reason being is when we charge the $5 per head on their crew, they're not able to pass that through. They can't charge their crew when they pull up to Santa Barbara. So what this allows them to do is work with their passengers, and that just gets folded into the rate of the passenger fees. Regarding slip fees, we generally get this question, well, what does a 2% increase look like? And so what we've done is we've taken a number of slip lengths on the left and input that 2% increase and what that is per foot. So it varies on a 20-foot from 17 cents per foot up to, on a 60-foot space, 24 cents per foot. Okay, well, what does that do on a month-to-month basis? Well, again, 20-foot, that adds about $3.37 to your monthly slip fee, and for 60-footers, it adds about $14.15 to your monthly slip fee. Now, each year, we send out a sheet to a number, I believe it's 18 marinas up and down the coast of California, everywhere from Santa Cruz all the way down to Oceanside, I believe is how far we get down south. And we ask them a host of questions. It's a survey I'm very thankful that these folks fill it out. Susan Hazard is great at following up and making sure folks fill those out, because it presents us with a lot of information. It's everything from slip fees to parking fees and everything in between, what kind of facilities you have at your harbor. And then we compile all this information, and then we send it back to everybody, so everybody's on the same page and knows what everybody else has. So it's a nice service for other marinas as well. So we like to see this to see how we fit within those 18 marinas. So on the left, you'll see the marina, Santa Barbara on the top there. The two asterisks denote private marinas, both one Anacapa Isle and the other Bahia Marina. Those are both down in Ventura. We then have Ventura Village and Long Beach Shoreline. Those are both publicly owned facilities. So you can see with the 30-foot, 40, 50, 60, and beyond, we are still very affordable for folks. And our occupancy rating is at 100%. You'll see some of these other folks not quite there. We've seen a pickup. Ventura Village has seen some pickup. I spoke with their folks the other day, and they're at about 88 to 90%, and others hovering around the 80 to 90%. And it varies depending on the size of the marina, location, and other factors. But again, good sign. We're right in there. We're very affordable, and we do present a number of nice amenities for folks to come up and visit. So noting what our proposed fee adjustments are and moving forward, our revenue assumptions for fiscal year 2017 are up on the screen. On the right are our 4 different revenue-generating programs. The box to the right is the fiscal year 16 projections, and these are what we've worked on with our finance department to fine-tune over the last month or so. And then our proposed fiscal year 17 budget as far as revenues are concerned. And on the far right is the percentage change from the fiscal year 16 projection to 2017 budget. So overall, big picture, we're looking at about a 2% increase in revenues. We'd like to keep that relatively conservative. Again, a lot of our parking, as well as the revenue we receive from restaurant leases and things like that, are somewhat weather dependent. Granted, people are always going to come down, but when we have good weather, we do see an increase in folks coming down. And with bad weather, you generally don't. So an overall, a 2% increase, 2% in property management, pretty much flatlined in financial management. Parking services, we're projecting it to go up about 1%. And in marina management, we're looking to stay strong and increase by about 3%. Slip transfer fees are a big part of our marina management revenues. And this is a chart going back to 2008, showing the fluctuation in those. You'll see 2008 was up at about 600, and then we had a precipitous falling out in 2009. So it kind of goes up and down. The last couple of years since 2012, it's gone up pretty smoothly until last year, and it went through the roof, about doubling what we normally get. We're generally around the $675,000 mark as far as slip transfer fees are concerned. Last year it was over $1.2 million. So far this year, we've seen through December 31st, we saw 30 transfers at about $350,000. And in the last 2 months through the end of February, we've only seen a total of 4 transfers. We're hoping that picks up. We'd rather not see a slide like we did from 2008 to 2009. But we'll see how that goes forward. Hopefully it'll pick itself back up. So again, it's a hard thing to predict for us. On the personnel front, just as a reminder, we have 46 permanent staff consisting of 4 managers, 5 supervisors, 10 Harbor Patrol officers, and 27 general employees. Up till this year, we have had no permanent staffing increase in over 14 years, which is pretty astounding. And we do employ a considerable amount of hourly employees. Our Harbor Patrol has a few that work as crew that help out a considerable amount, maintaining boats and things of that nature. Our facilities folks, there are a number of hourly folks there, but by far the most, generally around the 50 to 60 people come in as hourlies for our parking services. Obviously, as we get closer to summer, we ramp that back up to the high of about 50 or 60. So as was mentioned in the recommendations, we are requesting that a new position be added to the waterfront department. Again, first new position in over 14 years. This would be the title would be an administrative specialist with an accounting emphasis. Reason being is we have changed a lot over the last 14 years. Our revenues have almost doubled. Everything from parking to leases continue to increase and be more work intensive. We have an inordinate amount of special events that take place in our parking lots. Our beachfront is a very popular place to be, whether it be weddings. Anybody who's down on any given weekend throughout the entire year, you're almost guaranteed to see some sort of walk or run, some nonprofit group running that, and that takes a whole lot of staff. It takes a whole lot of accounting. We have taken over since fiscal year 2015 the billing and receipts from our finance department, and that's solely under us now. And that includes the billing and receipts on 1,139 boat slips, 67 leaseholds. We have a tremendous amount of revenue tracking and analysis that helps us with our budgeting. Again, an increased workload since assuming all the billing and accounts receivable duties from our finance department. And that includes everything, the bills that go out, the bills that come in. So we're processing all of those. And currently we have essentially two primary staff working on that. The idea with this new position is obviously to help out with that, and the cost of that new position would be offset by the savings we've realized in assuming that billing and those billing and account receivable duties. It's pretty much nearing an even swap. We assume those duties. We need some help, and this would the savings we received would go to pay this new person if approved. We have put that forth we had to fill out an analysis for our human resources folks. They've analyzed the position, and they have recommended that it be fulfilled. But again, we do this as part of our budget process. We'd like to get your okay on that as well. We're also still waiting on the city administrator to give his okay, and of course, it would then go to council as part of the city's budget process. So it is a process to go through. It's not just something we enter into lightly.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I might jump in just for a moment. One of the advantages to us taking over the billing workload from finance has been that we're able to control it ourselves, and it's easier for us to do because we're real familiar with it. But it's also a savings from the finance department service charges for doing that service for us, for doing the billing. So I don't have my sheet with me, but in FY 13, I believe we were paying on the order of $80,000 a year in our overhead allocation for billing services from the finance department. We took over the billing in FY 14, and I think we paid $75,000. This year, FY 16, we're down to $26,000. So we're working with the finance department to make that a zero, and that would virtually offset the cost of this new position. So it should be revenue or expense neutral and very much needed. And another thing to consider, too, which I was talking to Chair Spicer at our monthly meeting earlier this week, is that we have two accounting folks that are very dedicated at the waterfront, and they've each been there at least 25 years. So they know all the nuances of all this work that they do. One works primarily in receivables, and the other in payables. But it's a succession planning thing as well. They're not going to be there forever. We'd like to get somebody in there that can possibly get some training and get moved into those positions, because those guys have no immediate plans to retire, but Dave and Damien would like to do that someday. So it's succession planning, and it's expense relatively expense neutral. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Scott. And that moves us into proposed expenditures. Overall, this is broken down on a consolidated level, but overall, you'll see at the bottom far right corner, the percent change from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 17 is about 2.5%. That's a nominal increase, if you will. Again, our revenues exceed our expenditures, which is always a good thing to have. Scrolling down here briefly, a couple of the numbers you'll see that might give you pause. The transfers to capital down 18.1%. That varies on a year-to-year basis, just depending on what capital projects we have lined up for the next year. You'll see in our transfer to Harbor Patrol Vessel Replacement Fund, last year you folks approved and council agreed to start up this fund with an initial a number of $75,000 per year. We're proposing now to double that, make that $150,000 per year. We want to be in a good place when we do need to replace those boats, to be able to do it with a minimal impact on our year-to-year budget. So by planning ahead, that's what we would plan to do. You'll also see a significant increase, a doubling of our non-capitalized outlays. And that's primarily due to some equipment that is needed in our Harbor Patrol. They need new firearms. Most of the firearms are 15 to 16 years old, and so they're in need of replacement. It'll get them the newer firearms. They're not so heavy. They're made of a lighter, I believe it's even some sort of composite or plastic. So that's something of importance, as safety is one of our big things down at the harbor. And then also some self-contained breathing apparatus equipment. Our current, and that's for fighting fires and things like that, our current equipment is not in line with what the city fire department requires, and so we'd like to upgrade that and make that up to date with their requirements. And then lastly, we'd also like to install some new security cameras in our harbor main kiosk, as well as the Stearns Wharf kiosk. The cameras we have are about 10 or 12 years old. They don't make replacement parts for those anymore, so we can't upgrade them. We can't buy. We need to buy new ones. Is basically we can't swap in and out parts. So we'd like to do that. It is an important part of our security down at the harbor. In the past, we have been able to, on the rare occasion, a few years ago, we caught one of the trucks that was apparently supporting a panga boat. So hopefully that doesn't happen anymore. But we do need to have that. We've got people, especially at the harbor main, there 24/7, 365 days a year. So that's an overview of our expenditures. Again, as I stated, revenues versus expenditures. The green line is the revenues. The red is the expenditures. The spike you see there on the red line in 2015, that was $1 million spike in the expenditure column, and that was when we went and paid off one of our loans. So that, when you think about it, that's a good spike. If we didn't have that, it'd be a nice even trajectory up, but we did get rid of one of those loans. So as you can see, we've got a nice separation between our revenues and expenditures that goes off into the future and hopefully continues that way. As far as our debt service obligations, this used to be 4 bullets. Now we have 3. So we have our certificates of participation. Under each, you'll see what the current rate is that interest rate we're paying and how long the original debt was for. On the right is what we owe and the years remaining. I should let you know that based on Carl's report earlier, that $8 million under the D-ball loan is now $9,122,000. So that'll be updated. But again, these are our 3 debt service obligations, varies in length from 9 to 27 years remaining on those. Our general fund loan is at a city rate, so it varies. And it's pooled with a whole bunch of other debts. And that is a summary of our debt service. Moving forward, as far as our reserves are concerned, we now have 3 reserve accounts. One is our operating fund available reserves, and these are all as of 6/30/2015. At that point in time, we had a little over $4.7 million. Our Harbor Preservation Fund, which I should note also acts as our capital fund. So other departments have just a capital fund. Ours is called the Harbor Preservation Fund. We're a little over $4.4 million. And then, of course, the new fund that your commission approved last year, as well as City Council, and that's the Harbor Patrol Vessel Replacement Fund at $75,000. And again, we'd like to increase that annual contribution to that to $150,000. So moving forward into our waterfront capital projects, they are paid for from 3 primary sources. One is our surplus revenue, or our reserves above policy. Our capital reserve, which again is our Harbor Preservation Fund. And then the Marina One program is funded by our state Division of Boating and Waterways loan. Our capital program, which was approved last year as part of the 2-year budget, includes all the projects you'll see up there. The Marina One replacement, our Stearns Wharf timber pile replacement. I believe I went over these last month. And then a number of other projects, repowering Harbor Patrol vessels, Marina 2, 3, and 4 NTI, parking lot maintenance program, which will be focused on the launch ramp area this coming year, and then our annual ADA handrail and sidewalk repairs. So it's a little over $3.1 million, but again, we take out the 1.9, almost $2 million from the Marina One loan, and that's where you get our capital outlay transfer of just shy of $1.2 million. So Carl and his folks have a lot on their plate for next year, but again, it continues to keep the waterfront a nice place to be and visit. Moving into our P3, which is our performance program. Last April of 2015, I presented an overview of what our performance program was here at the city and how the Waterfront's performance program fit into that. So we have 8 different programs with measurable program and project objectives. We have 39 measurable and project objectives. And then we also, aside from that, have 63 workload measures that we continue to monitor. They change a few every year. We update those because some of them are project-based. The project ends, we move on, possibly have a new project. But it's all a means to measure citywide efficiency, where we can be more efficient, where things need to be worked on or improved. And so this is every department at the city does this. In our current year, fiscal year 16, we're on target to meet or exceed our year-end goal of 85% of program objectives being achieved by the end of the fiscal year. And I should note that Dominique Samario is our admin analyst who is really on top of all this and keeps us all honest and moving forward with all of our objectives. A few that I picked out for next year. I was on a customer service binge here, so these are all customer-oriented and public-oriented. Parking services. We have a goal to return 95% of our customer phone calls within 24 hours. Our parking folks are constantly on the phone, and whether it's a lot of it is people wanting to schedule events, see what kind of venues we have for events, how much the space is rent out for, and things like that. And as you can imagine, when somebody's planning a wedding, that's generally not just one conversation, but a whole host of conversations that they'll have with our staff. And also you get calls on occasion regarding parking citations and things like that, we want to get back to these folks, explain our processes and our programs so they can understand a little bit better. Harbor Patrol, this is always a neat one, enhancing public relations by conducting a minimum of 35 class or public tours. And when I say neat, it's wonderful to see classrooms of children out on the boats, seeing what takes place as far as Harbor Patrol is concerned. They get to shoot off the fire hose, which is always a hoot for the kids. You're constantly hearing squeals and giggles. So it's a nice thing for them to know, and it's a good thing for our Harbor Patrol kind of. It's a stress release for them as well, having some fun. And then marina management, we like to process 95% of our visitor slip assignments within 30 minutes of a vessel arriving. I think this is just a great customer service measure. Somebody comes up, they're tired, they've sailed, who knows how far they've come that particular day, week, month, and we can get them into a slip within 30 minutes. We like to make it quick and efficient for us. They come up, we process it, and they're on their way to enjoy their stay in Santa Barbara. So that's just another one of our customer service-oriented measures that we continue to track. As far as our budget review schedule, as you all know, as you see me here a lot in the last couple of months, this is not a one-stop process. We start back with our Harbor Commission Budget Committee meeting back in the middle of December. We had another one of those in early February. And we had our Harbor Commission mid-year report, as well as our fiscal year 2017 budget overview back on the 18th of February. We met with our city administrator and our finance staff and gave a presentation to them on our proposed budget in early March. We're here before you today with the Harbor Commission budget recommendation. Moving forward, it is not over. We have our council budget work session on the 11th of May. We also have the Finance Committee the following week to discuss the proposed fee adjustments, and that's on the 17th. And then on June 21st, the city our finance folks will be before the city council, and we'll be taking the entire city budget before city council for approval. And one thing that's not in there are all the various, we're not just obviously the only ones who go to a council budget work session. Everybody does it. So this is a very busy time for our finance folks and everybody else who has to deal with numbers, and it continues through all year long, really. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Budget is our Golden Gate Bridge. Once you're done, you start back at the beginning. Any questions for Mr. Bossy? We have quite Commissioner Bantolin.
Thank you, Mr. Bossy. Couple questions. So the cruise ship change from 5 to 7, I don't know the exact ratio, but I assume that's revenue neutral.
Commissioner Spicer, Commissioner Bantlin, I should have stated that, yes, it essentially comes out at a wash, if not a slight advantage to the waterfront department. For example, if you have 3,000 passengers on a boat with 1,000 crew, which is it's generally about a 3-to-1 ratio, if not more, on the crew side. At $5 a head, that's $20,000. Now, switching over to this new model that was proposed to us, or that Scott and Dominique have been working on with the cruise ships, it would be $7 per person for just those 3,000 passengers. That's $21,000. So in that particular scenario, it's a slight boost of $1,000, but nonetheless a boost.
Right. It does seem more fair. I mean, I think they can charge through their customers either way, but
Exactly.
But it seems more fair. On the increase to the Harbor Patrol Vessel Replacement Fund, I like that. I'd been thinking about that last fall when we initially talked about it. I'm just curious, have you guys looked at any? I know it's a little bit early, but I think Homeland Security is the one who has quite a few grants where we may not have to pay for all of number 3 or maybe even number 2. So I'm just kind of curious if you guys have looked at that.
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Bantalan, the Division of Boating and Waterways has a grant program for Harbor Patrol vessels, and we're applying for some for future either repowers or purchases. And so we've depreciated out some of the vessels that are very short time span because they're already old, so that number is pretty high. Once we have a newer fleet, we'll depreciate them out over 30 years, and that number will go down per year. But we'll take advantage of all the grant opportunities we have. Dominique is working on a grant application right now for Boat 2.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Sloan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bossy. Great report. On the parking revenue, just remind me, where do we stand this year versus kind of year-to-date versus budget? Are we ahead in parking revenue?
That's a great question. Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, we are slightly ahead of last year at this time, which is quite amazing considering that last year all of our programs basically had record years. We are holding on tight. I haven't looked at the numbers in the last couple weeks, but I assume with the weather that we've had or lack of weather that we had, that we still have good weekends down in the harbor, which, before a lot of these weekends, when you get the 80 degrees, it's similar to pretty close to a summer weekend.
Right.
So we are right at, if not a little bit above last year at this particular time.
Even with the parking on the wharf being down?
Even with the parking on the wharf being down, again, most likely a result of all the construction on Lower State Street, which is going to continue for another year. And that's been factored in because we go lot by lot and project out what we anticipate the next year. So we have ramped down our revenue projections for Stearns Wharf next year as well, because their idea is around this time next year, Cabrillo should be open, State Street should be open, and it should be almost back to normal. That's with all those different projects, they're kind of culminating and finishing roughly around the same time.
Okay, yeah, and the reason for the questioning is that we've had a couple of very good years, weather-wise, almost like perfect. And we're projecting increasing parking revenue from an already perfect year. So that's just why I was asking that. And and we haven't raised parking rates. So what's the thinking on? And I realize it's just a percentage, a point, but even still, what's the thinking there?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I looked at the parking revenues two weeks ago or so, and about 64% of the year, or wherever we were at the time I looked at them, our outer lots, we have several that are above 80, that are at 80% of budget for the year already. Harbor Main is right on target. The outer lots are. The wharf is the only one that's down. So we're way ahead of where we should be according to budget. So we'll beat the budget. We may not quite make what last year was, but we'll definitely make budget.
Okay, and that was really where I was going with that first question is, if we're ahead right now, then obviously you can see projecting an increase over the budget for next year. So
And Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, another thing we have to factor in, we kind of look at what's going on in the area. Obviously, the funk zone continues to thrive. Carl and his staff have put in that access point. We've seen an uptick in our Garden Street lot, which used to be kind of our lower, I don't want to say underperforming, it performed fine, but it was one of our lower lots. We've seen that lot increase significantly. We've also got the new hotel down at the base of Milpas and Cabrillo, which is slated to open here in the coming months. Obviously, they have their own parking, but I'm anticipating some sort of symbiotic relationship with people parking over there and walking across the street to have a drink or whatever. So we kind of project out and look at those things as well.
Okay, good. Just shifting gears for a second. So in the report, we had the Harbor Preservation Fund at one number, and then you showed something that was actually higher.
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, since the report, as I was stating, we continue to work with our finance department to really fine-tune these numbers. So again, I really have to thank Damian Goodall, who is just under constant pressure and a barrage from us to change this, change that, update this, tweak that,
Right.
based on new numbers coming in.
Okay.
We're hoping and we're confident that as we get closer to, obviously, the June time period, we will definitely have a more comfortable number set.
Go back to that slide real quick for a second, just the reserve balances. So the Harbor Preservation Fund, the operating reserve is at 4,745. Okay. Because the number in here, 3,145, isn't
Yeah, right here.
isn't 25% of the. I think it might be a typo, and if so, that's fine. If that's a correct number, that's fine. Let's just move on.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sloan, I believe the $3.1 million figure in the report is the most accurate one. I believe that this slide includes what we call reserves above policy,
Okay.
which every year when we finish and we finish the year with revenues more than expenses, we set aside the reserves for next year.
Right. Right.
And anything above that at some point washes into the Harbor Preservation Fund. So what you're looking at here is a snapshot on June 30th of 2015 at the very close of the fiscal year. The next day, on July 1st, the reserves above policy washes in.
Right.
It should at some point. I mean, obviously, don't get to it on that day, but eventually it moves into a different
Account.
part of the reserve. So it's a moving target, and I believe that includes the reserves above policy, and this doesn't.
Okay. And
That's
the reason why I
exact-
brought that up is this 3.145 is less than 25% of our budget.
Yeah, I'll have to take.
It's supposed to be the covenant there. It says 25% of budget. And so, but if it's a timing issue, that's fine. If at the end of the fiscal year is when we have to have 25% or more of the budget in this fund, then we were well covered. And so,
That's generally the first thing off the top. And Scott's right. That's a typo on my part. I included the reserves above policy component, so it is the 3.145. So the factor in your.
A lot of numbers flying around and updates going on all the time.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Just how about a little easier one? What's the timing on the hire of the new person?
Chair Spicer, Commissioner Sloan, that's a good question. Again, we're still in that process. We've asked for it. Our human resources staff has done the analysis, come down, sat with the people, gone through a day with them in their lives. And they have recommended to the Administrative Services Director as well as the City Administrator that be put in. So we're hoping to hear shortly that they're going to be recommending that to Council as well. Our thought, once we hear that it's a go, if that is the way it goes, and we hope it is, then we'll get started putting together the material, and we'd like to see them, as soon after the first of the year as possible, depending on when we're allowed to actually put that job out to market and things like that. But as soon as possible. I mean, it's very much needed.
Okay, great. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Okay. Brian, I just have one thing. On the debt service, the smallest one was the general fund,
That's correct, $900,000.
and that's money we owe to the city of Santa Barbara's general fund.
That is correct. And that is, I'm getting confused with my slides here, where it is. That is from a number of things. Primarily, it's from the rebuild of Stearns Wharf. But at the time, we also consolidated, over time, I should say, consolidated a number of loans from the past, from the 80s and the 90s, and lumped that in. So that $900,000 is a general fund loan. That's why it has that city rate, which varies, but is generally very favorable.
And I know we've discussed this or talked about it in the past. We can accelerate payment if we choose, or if we choose to put some of our bounty towards that.
With the general fund loan, I'm sure we could work something out. Another option to accelerate it is the possibility of paying it off.
That would be
The
even better.
$900,000. And just as you saw, we had that $1 million spike, but then it
Right.
goes back to normal, and we're saving, and I should have pointed that out, and I think I may have last month, we're saving about $100,000 a year by paying that last loan off, which would have gone many years out. So that was definitely a cost savings, and it is something to consider.
Yeah, no, I like it, but I also realize it plays into the larger role of the entire city and not just our department. So. Okay.
Chair Spicer, again, if I might interrupt everything. I did speak with the city administrator this morning, Paul Casey, at our monthly meeting about paying down that loan. It's almost $900,000. It's not huge, but it's nice to just be to wipe it out and simplify things. It doesn't represent a huge savings. It would be $123,500 a year that we wouldn't have to pay anymore, and it would just simplify things. Right now, it's at a very favorable interest rate.
Oh, okay.
So it's not a huge, urgent thing to do, but things change sometimes. And frankly, on any given Tuesday, that interest rate could be something else.
Right. Well, and I know one of the models that are used a lot is you pay off the highest interest rate, regardless of the year or the dollar amount. So if that one's low, it may be more work than it's worth to advance it.
Well, we're looking at it. My next stop is with the finance director. I'd like to get his thoughts on that. But in addition to that, as we've discussed with the Budget Committee, Commissioner Sloan and McIntosh, and I think we've mentioned it at these meetings, we're looking at amortizing the DBAW loan over 20 years instead of 30 years, and that's a 4.5% loan, which will be our highest percent loan, which is our highest percent loan now, and also paying off the last phase of the Marina One construction out of excess reserves, and not accruing, not adding that onto our Division of Boating and Waterways loan. So those are ways we're trying to keep the borrowed money down, pay it off faster, and save on the interest. And actually, that slide is nice. I've worked with the COPS. Debt service has been our biggest one for so many years, and when we refinanced it in 2014, I think it was, we didn't extend it out. So now I'm looking at it; it's the end is in sight on that loan. It used to be like when we refied it in, I did it in 2002, and it was $19 million. So to see it at $10 million and only 12 left, it's like right around the corner almost.
It's when your car is paid off. Yes.
Feels good.
Yeah. So, Commissioner Bantlin.
Yeah, I was just curious. You've mentioned the rate is favorable right now. What is the rate right now? Do we know?
Commissioner Spicer, Bantaland, I don't know what it is right now, but it is very favorable. It's probably around 2.5%. It's variable.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Bossy, thank you so much. That's quite a mouthful for you to live and breathe for us. I appreciate it. And now we have some work to do. B through J require a motion and a vote. And Commissioner Sloan, you had mentioned that it'd be best if we took B separately and then C through J,
Correct.
unless there's opposition. So I'd like to I'd like us to take a look at B, and then we'll look at B separately, and then we'll go with C through J. And I would recommend the approval of item B, and would ask for a second.
I'll second.
Very good. Can we just do this with Jim sitting here? I guess you have to officially abstain.
Yeah, I mean, I can
You're abstaining?
Recuse.
recuse.
Okay.
I should go and leave on this.
Nah.
Yeah.
So. Okay, so we have a first and second on B, and all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any abstentions? Any nays? Okay, that passes. Now we are on to C through J. I would take a recommendation. Okay.
Second it.
There's a first and a second. Okay. We'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Okay. Thank you for your work, Brian. They'll all pass. Mr. Reedman, any staff communications?
Nothing from staff tonight, Mr. Chair.
Anything from the commission?
Question. Perhaps you can answer it, Mr. Conman. There was a report that somebody drowned in the harbor a couple of weeks ago. Where was that, and what was the cause?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kramer, that was over near the base of the ramp in Marina 4. We didn't. The police department handled that case, so it wasn't Harbor Patrol's analysis, if you will. But the individual was identified by the police, and our role was minimal. Well, actually, not minimal on the response. We worked on the man for a half an hour with CPR, but ultimately it was a police case.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
First and second, and all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.